my book of the month, and then giving me a space to sell a few books and read an excerpt from it. We're going to read chapter 1 from the book, and if you like it, please come get a copy. Or if you like the writing style but maybe tech novels not for you, I've got other books. Come talk to me, and I'll find something you do like. I got a little bit of everything. But we are going to go ahead and get started with the reading. So if you bought the book already, you can read along. Open your head and also page 5.
Well, I think so you read it for.
All right. So, here. Chapter 1, Missed by a Hair. The city was a miserable place in the winter months. The cloud cover hardly ever seemed to go away. The cold winds whipped through the streets, and if you were on the wrong street when the wind shifted, it very well might knock you off your feet. If it rained, no point carrying an umbrella. It would be turned inside out before you had the chance to blink. Just get to walking. The misery would hit you either way. Might as well get a move on. Detective Thomas Gibran stepped to the edge of the canopy that hung over the door of his apartment building. He looked for a long second at the rain and felt the wind rushing down the sidewalk, making his trench coat blow in the breeze. He looked at the large drops crashing to the ground and took a deep breath. Time to get going. He pulled his fedora down tight, put his chin to his chest, and started walking. His precinct wasn't too far away. He hopped this way and that way across the street if he could get a break from the rain because of a long overhang. The cars honked at Gibran once or twice as he stepped off the curb to a close call with speeding metal. He had to fortify himself on Marion Street when it became a wind turbine. It was just another day in paradise. At last, Gibran made it to the precinct. It was bustling with the morning. The guys on night shift were gathering their things, getting out the door as fast as they could. Gibran listened to the muffled laughter and conversation as he took his hat off and shook the loose water from it before putting the fedora back on. As he arrived in his bullpen, he took the trench coat off and put it on the coat rack. Underneath his armor against the weather was a beat-up navy blue sports coat and a red tie that had clearly seen better days. He found his desk, which was lined up facing his partner's desk, and then Gibran proceeded to slump into his creaking chair with the cracked leather. They had closed the case yesterday. It was a homicide investigation that turned out to be a suicide. Eddie was a little disappointed that it wasn't more exciting. Eddie was Eddie Donahue. He was Gibran's partner and had been for the last 2 years. Nope, it had been 3. The two worked well together. Eddie could be a bulldog, go right after a case. He'd be a little rough around the edges. If Gibran had any real complaint about him, then it was that he was more often concerned about the excitement of the case than for the justice they were supposed to bring the victims. Gibran could be more methodical, no emotion, willing to wait. Eddie teased him that he was the patient iceberg. Gibran would let go of a crooked smile and a hint of a laugh. Thomas looked at his desk, littered with paper, and exhaled. Anything new on the docket this morning? Eddie stretched me on. Nothing yet. Slow start. Picked up his mug and took a long gulp of strong coffee. Anything good in the paper? Gibran picked up the paper in the middle of the desk. Not much here in town. Corrupt police chief in Franklin got sentenced today. Gibran did not look up as he scanned the front page. Good for him. Could happen to a nicer guy. The Garfield comic was funny, and the classic Peanuts was the World War I flying ace. Excellent. Gibran's eye had settled on a story about the upcoming auction night gala at the Newhouse Art Museum. It was the city's biggest party of the year. All the biggest names would be in attendance, and their pocketbooks would be wide open. They would auction off everything from the classic cars to the magnificent paintings and sculptures to historical artifacts. The money went to charity. Everyone would be there in black ties and beautiful gowns. It was a headache for the police working that night. A lot of noise and camera flashes made one a little jumpy. And rude rich people just pissed you off. Since making detective, Thomas fortunately didn't have to work guard duty at that event. The routine shuffling of feet and papers created a kind of peace in the room. Until all at once there was no peace. Alarms went off through the building. Thomas and Eddie shot up out of their chairs. Eddie was throwing his sports coat over his shirt, reconcealing the shoulder holster and pistol he was wearing. Gibran grabbed the arm of the cadet, running into the room. What's happening? First City Bank is getting robbed right now. All hands on deck. Thomas let the man go as he and Eddie grabbed their trench coats and headed out the door. It was still windy, but the rain had let up, and they got to their car. Since they were detectives, they drove in unmarked burgundy cars. They followed a fleet of white cars with flashing blue lights, screaming down the road. First City Bank was only a few blocks away, but the police cars were surrounding the city block on all sides. As the detectives rolled up on the scene, a lieutenant with a megaphone could be heard.
Come out with your hands up. Surrender peacefully, and no one will get hurt.
Eddie, with not a little satisfaction, said, looks like we meet SWAT here. Thomas was driving, but had slowed down and not gone right up to the still-forming wall of squad cars. The bank was a grand old 4-story building that had been there since the late 1800s. It was the largest bank in town, and between the always clean white paint and the gargantuan Corinthian columns looked every bit the part. The police cars were lined up in front. Cops were using the cars as barricades as they trained pistols and rifles at the front door. The armored car that had been just minding its own business that morning was parked in the alley. Eddie looked at him in disbelief. What are you doing? Get up there! We can be in the middle of the action! Just wait a second, Eddie. Something's off. Eddie puffed and rolled his eyes. What is it, Iceberg? Not sure. Duran's eyes were scanning back and forth. Then it happened. The armored car revved its engines and tore out of the alley. It didn't stop or slow down. It burst through the line of squad cars as if it were a monster truck rally. Shots rang out, but they bounced harmlessly off the armored truck, and it took off down the road. Hang on, Eddie. Duran kicked his car into gear in hot pursuit. The two vehicles swerved around cars and took corners hard. The armored car took out 2 lampposts, and the detectives roughed up the side of a parked vehicle as they kept pace with the fleeing bank robbers. Eddie, see if you can shoot out their tires. Eddie smiled from ear to ear. With pleasure. Eddie leaned out and started taking shots with his pistol at the rear tires. He was not having a lot of luck. Eddie leaned back in as they made another sharp turn. Doesn't look like you got them. It's not as easy as it looks, Thomas. As the 2 high-speed vehicles flew around the next corner, the back doors of the armored truck flew open, revealing 2 men dressed all in black with ski masks. They stood there with their arms stretched out. It was both slow motion and lightning. Without a chance to react, 2 bullet holes appeared on the windshield. Gibran spun the car sideways as he slammed the brakes to the floor of the car. Gibran, stunned for a moment, started to process he had not been shot. The bullet whizzed past his ear and into the seat. He turned to his partner. Eddie, are you okay? Eddie? There was no answer. Eddie's eyes were wide open, as if he were surprised. It must have been the last thing he felt when the bullet slammed into him between his eyes. The armored car sped off recklessly down the road. The world was chaos and yet silent. Thomas just stared at his partner, who was there just a moment ago. If Duran had paid attention to the radio as he sat there and stared in shock at his partner, he would have heard that the rest of the police had caught up with the armored car. It was parked and empty. There was not a soul in sight. That's the end of chapter 1. If you want to hear what happens the rest of the way, I'll tell you copies of chapters 2 through 10.